Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rob Getty. I'm the DCA at Blanchfield. And I'm going to give you some perspective based on my background as a resident and as a preceptor, what I've learned and what I'm continuing to learn as I go through the process of being a preceptor. We'll talk about my organization a little bit as it applies to what we can provide for the resident, how we support the resident, how we get to know them, build the plan, select projects, help them develop, and then adjust throughout the year because you're going to do a lot of adjusting. So Blanchfield is a community hospital with 39 beds. We're situated on Fort Campbell, Kentucky. However, the installation straddles the Kentucky-Tennessee line. We say Kentucky because the post office is actually on the north side of the line. The hospital's in Tennessee. We are about 35 buildings, 500,000 square feet in the main one. We take care of nearly 100,000 dependent beneficiaries in the local area. About 71,000 are actually enrolled to us. One thing that is unique because of our location is that we have the benefit of 2 states worth of representatives and senators. So we've got that going for us, which is nice. Like I said, we're a community hospital. Fort Campbell is a FORSCOM installation. So that is a very, very young population. Over 90% of our beneficiaries are under the age of 45. Being FORSCOM and young soldiers, we provide a lot of primary care. We jump off of things or fall off of things and we break legs, so we do a lot of ortho. We have a heck of a lot of babies, and our soldiers deploy a lot and they see things that nobody should really see, so we provide a lot of behavioral health care. Just day in a life, this is a snapshot of us. So 39 beds, we struggle to keep 27 of them full. We have a hard time hitting that 70% metric because of our very young, healthy population. Young soldiers don't spend a lot of time in hospital beds, it's just a fact. About 72,000 people and 72,000 enrolled, I said. 5 babies a day, about 150 a month. And we are the home of the much storied 101st Airborne Division. So you can see that we provide most of the surgical and medical specialties that you'd find at any other community hospital. That makes us a good place to provide a fixed facility residency. So some things that set us apart a little bit from your typical community hospital. We also have a National Intrepid Center of Excellence like Walter Reed. We are a residency site for the Inter-Service Physician Assistant Program. I think I've heard that we are one of the larger ones. Virtual health. I think we've kind of established ourselves as a bit of a leader in Army medicine for virtual and telehealth. About 1.5 years ago, Blanchfield was part of a pilot program where we had virtual health carts that were in the emergency center, and we'd have a nurse escort a patient into a room. They'd sit in front of this cart with a high-res camera and some ancillary stethoscope, otoscope kind of stuff, and they would actually have an encounter with a primary care physician who was located at Eisenhower Army Medical Center. And that went very well. It was received well by patients, and that's proliferating throughout the Army. We also have audio appointments. Patient can call the appointment line, get a time for a provider to call them, not just a nurse, but a provider, and actually get a diagnosis and a treatment plan over the phone without ever a face-to-face visit. And we've now expanded that to a Skype-like environment where on the patient's mobile device, they can call the appointment center, make an appointment for a face-to-face, over your Skype appointment. We're actually rolling that out just this week, so we're catching up with what we've seen many of our civilian competitors already roll out a couple of years ago. Also, inpatient behavioral health, we send a lot to our local network. We are building a 12-patient facility or modifying some of our inpatient space so that we can recapture that from the network. Blanchfield is 1 hour north of Nashville, and Nashville has a very, very robust healthcare environment. There's Vanderbilt University Medical Center there. They are a level 1 trauma center. There's 2 level 2s there. As far as trauma goes, Vandy is the only level 1 within at least 100 miles. And they actually approached Blanchfield and said, guys, if we help you get there, will you please stand up as a level 3 trauma center because we're dying here. So they are facilitating our journey along that path. Part of what we get out of that is a training opportunity. So everything in Army medicine is about readiness. You got to tie it to readiness if you want to stand up a new program. We are working on a partnership to send our surgeons, some of our surgical teams, some of our medics down to Vandy to rotate through the ORs, get more currency on clinical cases, just to maintain their combat medical skills, because we have some difficulty maintaining that currency with our young, healthy population that we have. The local VA, there's a medical center in Nashville. There are about 20,000 VA veterans who live in the Clarksville area, and they are underserved for surgical and medical specialties. They have to travel that hour down to Nashville. So the local VA population has the demand. We certainly have capability and a lot of excess capacity for medical specialties, so we have some partnerships with the VA. Very robust ACHE environment. We've got Hospital Corporation of America and Tennessee Hospital Association right down the road in Nashville. But because we straddle that state line, we have memberships in both the Kentucky chapter and the Middle Tennessee chapter. So that is also kind of handy for getting face-to-face credits, because Congress is so difficult recently to achieve for ACHE. And lastly, this is what I think really sets Blanchfield apart as far as a residency site. We have currently 8, soon to be 9, Baylor alumni who are in key leadership positions. I'm effectively the COO, the DCCS is our chief medical officer. Our nurse method analyst is also our executive officer. That's roughly an assistant COO. Our chief of business ops, our chief information officer, our lead administrator for primary care, our chief of primary care for the soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, and also our inbound XO, who is a resident at Vandy. So we have a wonderfully supportive environment there. We've got people who've walked the Baylor path. They understand what the residency is all about, and they are very willing to put their arms around the new resident and assist any way they can. They also help me help the resident, so it's a great environment. So with all that said, we can provide a very thorough and robust fixed facility residency experience for the resident. Okay. So as far as life support and workspace, the residents have just come out of potentially an 87 credit hour didactic year, and they're tired. I like to allow as much flexibility as possible with their scheduling to let them take some leave. If they need to delay the reporting a little bit, I like to try to facilitate that so they can get their family on the ground, take a break, take a knee, catch their breath. They're going to be very busy as residents, but they're people. Give them a break. Physical location. This one is also pretty key, and I think it's important to why our residency works so well at Blanchfield. My background, I was a newly promoted major when I went through the Baylor program. When I got to Madigan for my residency, my workspace was in the command group, which was great because it gave me exposure to the C-suite operations, some of the things that go on behind the scene that you don't see out in the workforce. It was also a little bit isolating from the work environment where a lot of the projects actually come from. So we found it to be very beneficial to have the residents sit with our clinical services division folks. And I'll talk more on why that's a benefit later, but just carefully consider where that workspace is going to be. If you have somebody who's worked in an MTF before and they know how a hospital works and they're looking at more of a policy type residency, maybe the C-suite's the right area. If they've never been in an MTF before, they probably need to be out with some of those other folks who can help mentor and maybe provide a little bit more one-on-one than you might have time to provide. they're supposed to be mobile and agile. Please provide an ability for them to take their work with them as they go around. A laptop computer has been very, very useful. When we do the preceptor orientation, we basically sit down and give them the same command overview brief that we give to a dignitary. So they get all the flashy slides, some of the gee whiz stuff about the organization. We also sit down with the organizational chart and explain to them this is what the DCA is, this is what the DCCS is, because they may be coming from an environment where they've never heard of that, and the didactic year doesn't really touch on that all that much. So you need to give them an explanation of what a hospital structure looks like. And that's why I put the MedAct Reg 15.1 up there as well. That will give them an explanation of the committees and the governance structure and help them to understand just how the place is put together. Give them a chance to attend the organization's normal newcomers orientation, and then of course they're going to have a plethora of mandatory Army and MedCom and Regional Health Command online trainings that they have to attend to. So go ahead and give them the opportunity to do that. Along with the BEAR, which we should be getting from them, take a look at their ORB or the resume. Figure out what their professional background looks like, because that is definitely going to shape the weighting and the order of their rotations. If they've got a lot of experience in primary care, then they may want to gravitate to that, but you may need to pull them out of their comfort zone and make sure that they get additional focus in areas that they haven't seen before. For the BEAR, we've talked a good deal about it. It's a tool to help assess where the resident is, identify the gaps in their knowledge, and help target some of their projects and some of their rotations. During the orientation, you have an interview with the resident. Find out what it is that they want to be when they grow up. They're still figuring that out, but they know they have to do certain things along their career path. They've got to fit in ILE. Maybe they want to be a DCA in the future. Maybe they want to command a facility. Part of the residency is to meet the goals of the Baylor program. Part of it is to help set this individual officer up for success in the rest of their career. So get to know them, figure out what they want to be. One piece of perspective I have from my own experience, understand that the residency may be the only opportunity that the resident has to get experience in certain areas. So I came from the medevac world. I'd never seen a hospital. When I arrived to Madigan, I was a major. I did my residency, and my first assignment, my utilization assignment, was the chief of managed care there. In that organization, managed care focuses more on interactions outside the facility, referrals, enrollment, not so much on the clinical services division, the internal business operations. So I have found myself after that assignment having to go do things like attend the MedCom Practice Manager course to kind of strengthen some of my own knowledge areas. So depending on the seniority of your resident, they may be faced with the same situation where their follow-on assignment may be one that doesn't give them the opportunity to work in certain areas. Anticipate that. Look way out a couple of years ahead in their career, and if you think that's going to be a gap in their training, then try to focus on it during the residency. And identify all of your Baylor alumni, or if you're at a location where there's not a lot of Army-Baylor folks, others who may be good mentors. Likely those individuals will identify themselves to the resident pretty early on, but it's good to go ahead and help the resident build a network as soon as they arrive. I think there is certainly no best plan for building the residency. It's going to vary based on their background. Definitely want to consider real life, not just the professional life. So The resident may have a family wedding, vacations, they may be pregnant, and then you have to factor in the 12 weeks postpartum leave. So there may be some immovable objects on the schedule for that officer that you may need to account for. Also look ahead at major facility events that you have going on. If you have a renovation, if you're building a new structure and moving an operation into it, if you know your Joint Commission survey is coming up, those represent opportunities or they may represent obstacles. So just be sure to consider that as you're building the residency plan. For annual events, let's take resource management for instance. If I tell my resource manager that I want the resident to rotate through the second half of September, they are probably going to scream and run the other way because they are trying to get their end of FY closeouts done. So consider what the departments have going on as you're helping the resident schedule their plan. And I've hit on it a couple of times, and I think it's critical to start figuring out early on in the residency what the post-resident utilization assignment is going to be. They're a student right now, but if you're at a military facility, they're your officer right now too. And you need to figure out what it is that you want them doing a couple of years out and start using the residency as an opportunity to develop them. We talked a little bit about a good practice of maybe writing a letter to all the department chiefs. I do it with an email to prep the battlefield a little bit for the resident when they start coordinating their own rotations. It is the resident's responsibility to coordinate the rotations, but explain what the program is, make sure that the door is truly open to all of the meetings, that the departments fully understand that they need to give the resident the unfiltered version of what goes on. This is not an outsider, this is an insider, and they need to be treated as family and told really what's going on. So some core rotations that I think are really important to put up front for a newbie to an MTF, and I heard whispers, MTF is medical treatment facility. Our change of command at Blanchfield is actually today. We were passing the colors from Colonel Crosland to Colonel McQueen. Before he even took command, Colonel McQueen was given the facilities tour. That was on Monday. We think that's critical just to give him a layout of where everything is and behind the scenes gut of the organization. I think primary care is a critical one to have early on. Everywhere that Army medicine is, regardless of any of the other wonderful things that we do, we provide primary care. And like I said earlier, the resident may not go into a utilization assignment that has them working in primary care. So they have to have a foundation in it. So that's why I think it's important to put that up front in the rotation. Clinical support division, clinical services division, for the same reason. CSD and primary care tend to coexist. Resource management, that's where some of your analysts are going to be. That's where some of the folks who are going to help the resident develop their projects are going to be. So it's good to make those links early on if possible. IMD, just to get them some experience with the clinical systems. The second block of rotations are things that I think are also critical, but they may not be the most important ones to put right up front. And toward the bottom, not because they are less important, but because they are not core to the business of healthcare, are the things that are more Army-ish. The troop command, the structure that all of the uniformed folks at the facility belong to. The Warrior Transition Battalion, the Fisher House, those are unique things to Army medicine. I think they probably are not as core to the educational experience. When I was a resident, and for the two that I've had so far, I think it's important for the resident to try to see all of the major meetings that go on, all the committees, at least once. They don't need to regularly attend those, certainly, but it's good to get them the exposure. I think it is important for them to attend regularly the meetings of the departments where their projects are coming out of. That'll just give them more depth in that project, more perspective, more context, so they can see how that project impacts the larger organization. For the meetings that I think are critical for them to attend regularly, the board of directors or the executive committee, at Blanchfield we have something called the daily check-in, the DCI for safety, and it's a 4-day-a-week, 5 to 10 minute huddle where all of the department chiefs come and brief something safety related that happened in the last 24 hours. This sounds probably pretty familiar to a lot of the organizations who are on their journey to a high reliability organization. We consider this one of our best practices, and it's something that the resident should certainly see. The daily clinical morning report, that's the review of inpatients, emergency center patients. Good to see occasionally, but not all of the time. On Monday mornings, we do a weekly Chiefs update, a Chiefs stand-up. That's a good chance for the resident to hear about things that are going on and possibly pick up on projects that are going on out there, so they don't have to go search them out. They can hear about them. Attend some of the review and analysis sessions for clinical performance, and of course I like to have them attend the Joint Commission continuous compliance meetings all the time. Some particular meetings that I think would be useful for a 70 Alpha resident to attend are the Environment of Care Committee meeting. I mean, that's kind of DCA 70 Alpha bread and butter, our contribution to the organization as far as Joint Commission, the Environment of Care. So that one's pretty critical. And then the two PBACs, the Program Budget Advisory Committees for capital expense equipment and for hiring actions. Those are two major committees that the DCA runs, that the resident may run in the future, and it's good for them to see that, just understand how it works and some of the decision-making criteria that goes on. For the projects themselves, I think a good project does two things. It meets the program requirements for the resident, and it solves a problem that you have in the organization. Of course, you want to make sure that the projects are linked to the CEO or the commander's priorities. And I like to point to these three types of projects at the end as probably the most beneficial for a resident in a fixed facility type residency, somebody who may not have any experience in fixed facility health care. Every organization has a make-buy decision that they're evaluating. Probably every organization has a process that may be out of tolerance, and you're trying to stand up something new. So a BCA, a process improvement, and a program development are all, I think those are three really key types of projects to hit on. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, Blanchfield is pretty well situated to help the resident get linked up with ACHE events. It's difficult to get to Congress now, but identify the local members of your ACHE chapter and try to help them get involved. I think it's important to leverage education opportunities, especially ones that you think are going to be important for whatever that utilization assignment is for the resident. Some of the opportunities we've had to send residents for education in the past are decision science training. We sent Tyler Garrett to the primary care empanelment tool training because he's going to be our primary care administrator. M2, the Enterprise Data Mart, you can send them to that. The Basic Healthcare Administrators course, I believe that's already built into the Captain's Career course now, but if for some reason they haven't had it, that's a good program to send them to. And then I mentioned the Practice Managers course. That's like the 200 level administrator course that Medcom hosts, and that's also, if the resident isn't going to get the opportunity to go work in a primary care environment, Practice Manager course is a great one to send them to get some depth and some background there if they're going to not do it immediately in the future. And also we have Vanderbilt down the road. There's a resident there this year, so we did a resident exchange. Nate Kaiser came up and he spent about 3 days with us, and we sent Tyler Garrett down there, and they got an opportunity to take a look at each other's organizations. Glenn Gilson and I, back when he and I were both residents, he wasn't quite nearby. He was in Spokane, which was 5 hours from Tacoma, but he came over and spent some time seeing how we do things. So I think that's definitely beneficial. Stay flexible as far as the opportunities you have to adjust things along the way. Yeah, the quarterly assessments and the turn-in of the projects, those are set in stone, but as the preceptor, we have a lot of flexibility to schedule things for the resident. So September of 2014, when EVD was, at its height, the 101st Airborne Division was deployed to Liberia as the command and control element to build all of the hospitals in that country to treat the Ebola victims. So we were very, I think rightfully, fearful that we might have soldiers make it back to home station who somehow made it through screening but may still have, had the disease. And our Baylor resident that year, Major Gabby Neese, she took on the task of coordinating Blanchfield's response and our preparedness plan for Ebola. It wasn't something that fit nicely in with her residency plan, but it was important enough to the organization and important enough for her developmentally that we allowed her to do it. This past year, when Tyler was new to our organization, we were having a strategic planning conference. So we had him help us coordinate that. Also, late September of last year, we had our triennial Joint Commission survey. Certainly not a formal event on the residency plan, but we would have been foolish to miss the opportunity to get him involved there. Being as new in the organization as he was, escort officer was probably not the right role. Runner was probably a little too low, so scribe seemed to be kind of the Goldilocks role for him. And what better firsthand exposure can you get to Joint Commission than walking around with the surveyor for 4 days? So that was very beneficial to his development. As far as lessons that we as an organization have learned, or that I learned being a resident myself, I heard it said earlier that the resident probably doesn't know what they don't know yet if they haven't worked in a facility. So help them pick their projects. A BCA, a process improvement, a policy implementation, or program rollout, something like that. You probably already have a list of things that your department chiefs or maybe your other Baylor alums in the organization have come to you with and said, hey, I could use some help with A, B, and C. So you're not going to hand the resident all of their projects on a platter, but it may be good to have some strong suggestions about projects that they should focus their time on. And a couple of our best practices certainly leverage the junior mentors who you have in your organization. Round up all your Baylor folks, have them get their arms around the resident. It will really, really enrich the residency experience. And I talked about it a couple of times. Try to figure out as early on what the resident is going to be doing for a utilization assignment if they're going to stay in your organization, because that will allow you to start grooming them for that job, or to ensure that if that job is not going to get them a key piece of experience along their path toward being a DCA, that you can, during the residency year, try to provide depth in areas that they're not going to get in that utilization assignment. You're making an investment in the officer, so you're trying to make them as well-rounded after this 1 year and after this utilization as you possibly can. So that's entirely my perspective. That's what I've learned, as I said, as the resident and as a fairly new preceptor, but those are things that have worked well for us. What are your questions? Sir?
So with the focus on readiness and with the hospital commander being installation readiness proponent, I guess, do you think that there's value sending your residents out to supported units like on the first and spending time with them? And I don't know, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to guide this, I'm just curious what you think.
There may be, but I think I wouldn't send them out to the tactical units. I would make sure that the resident gets a good bit of exposure via Soldier Health Services. So LaPointe Troop Medical Clinic is our soldier-centered medical home where all of the brigades are seen. So in order to better understand what healthcare provides in terms of medical readiness, that's where I would target some of their effort, and I would probably make sure that the Chief of Soldier Health Services out there understands the specific intent for what we're trying to get the resident to learn in that rotation. I don't know that I would try to build into the plan an opportunity for the resident to go visit any of those tactical units, though.
Okay. Very good experience for our resident, though. It's at least the senior medical council that has, you know, maybe the commissioner general and the, yeah, I'm not sure what it's.
Community Health Promotion Council.
Yes, a couple of those different ones that installation leadership is on, so you get a better idea of the support and the priorities that they have that the hospital is providing.
Yeah, that is a good suggestion. Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question for you and also the Baylor faculty is, I don't know if you've seen the DCA Smart Book that was published recently. I know Dave Bitterman, another Baylor alumni, is behind that. It's a comprehensive book. Here's how to be a DCA, but also how to excel at other positions. If you're named an MTF commander and you haven't done anything along the Baylor lines, what do you need to know? Kind of a framework. It's a relatively thick book to look at. It can bring people up to speed really quickly if you're used to just working around and being on the tactical side. I thought that was a useful tool. It explains a lot. It wasn't done before. Even for Baylor, you might not necessarily understand what CHS or Ultima are, but you had a handbook to browse through.
Okay.